Welcome to the CyberCall, the podcast by Ride of Boom for managed service providers looking to stay ahead in an ever-changing world of cybersecurity. Each week, we dive into the latest threats, trends, and real-world strategies to help MSPs protect their clients and grow their businesses. Let's build a safer, stronger community together.
All right, everybody, it's go time. Welcome, everybody, and we are back at it here midway through August. Good to see you back with us, Gary. Thanks for joining, and thanks all for out there for joining in with us. Give everybody a few minutes to get in, and while we are doing so, I'm going to talk about a few things in the news, Gary. One thing that I was good to see was how quickly, Chris, you and I were talking about this last week, was N-able's response to two critical vulnerabilities for their N-Central platform. If I know it's quote unquote late, even though a few days, but if you know of anybody that is running N-Central on-prem that may have not received updates, whatever, please let them know. These are two critical vulnerabilities. CISA did put it out on the Kev. Hey, Todd, great to see you. And like I said, very quick response from N-able, getting a patch out there. So kudos.
Yeah, and mainly I find when people are running any of the RMM platforms on-prem, it's because they're usually the largest customers, right? So
that's a good point, Gary. That's a good point. And funny,
that means they have a team and they're on it, right?
Yeah, and funny, Gary, how things have evolved. Like when you and I, first started hearing about N-Central and Nitro back in 2002, 2003, and how for years, everything had to run on-prem. You had to have control of your PSA and your RMM, and now that's not necessarily the best approach to running those platforms. So that's one thing going on. Hey, Eric, good to see you. Let me just close those tabs. Another thing going on, I was talking to Corey about offline, is this came out just this morning. And, something Corey and I talk a lot about are these OAuth-based attacks. This one's a pretty significant one. But the reason I wanted to put it out there for everybody to see is Workday, which is obviously, Gary, a major SaaS platform provider for enterprises, was attacked through Salesforce. So their Salesforce instance, more than likely, if you read through the document, Corey, maybe you could kind of just give a quick overview of probably what happened. They call out an OAuth-based attack, but can you kind of walk through this, probably what happened via this phishing attack? This is speculation because we don't have the actual, but probably more than what happened based on what the article is sharing.
Definitely subjective with what information they provided, right? Typically, when you see this, it's a phishing attack that comes in. They trick the end user into saying, "Hey, we need your credentials," and those credentials are actually creating a enterprise application for OAuth in 365, as an example. So that way that they maintain a persistence and they get back in, they're bypassing any type of security feature you are doing because it constantly lives off that persistence. So MFA is out the window, conditional access out the window, doesn't matter. They maintain that connectivity. So it's a common phishing tactic now.
Yeah. Jamie, are you guys seeing this quite often in your team as well?
Yeah, I don't think we've seen so much from the Salesforce stuff, but we see similar things in other technologies as well. Yeah.
Yeah. These adversary in the middle have become so common.
Yeah.
Or using some type of authentication mechanism to get persistence
and it's. I mean, if I put my adversary hat on, it's smarter because a lot of organizations, especially organizations that are trying to do their own SOC, right, where our guys are monitoring it, it's easy for them to monitor authentication requests. But most will ignore OAuth authentication, right? They'll ignore the applications that are getting created because they just don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And so, I see a lot of organizations that just allow single sign-on anywhere. They allow typical OAuth by default instead of blocking it by default. So it's a smarter tactic by the adversaries because it can also go unseen for a long time.
Got it. All right. Lastly, I'm just going to put in here for today's conversation, as I set the stage, Jamie Levy's blog that she created, gosh, about a week or so ago now, Jamie. I forget the exact date, but it's been out there.
It feels like months.
2 weeks.
To be honest.
Yeah, it feels like months, but it was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks
actually,
ago.
today.
2 weeks today. And we're going to talk about, Jamie, what early on, something like 30,000 views, right? I mean, it was,
Yeah.
and what did that tell you, Jamie, that like when you see a blog get that kind of hit, what did that maybe tell you about what's going on in the web universe, if you will, the internet universe?
I think mostly people were just searching for information. There wasn't at the time, there hadn't been an official release yet from SonicWall about this is what is actually happening. And so people were just trying to figure out like what is happening. A lot of people were getting hit by it. We saw within 1 week, we had seen like 20 people that had basically been exploited because of this particular flaw. And so, we were hit pretty heavily by it. Other researchers that I was talking to in various CTI forums, et cetera, were also doing a lot of investigation. So people were afraid. They were just trying to figure out like what's going on. We weren't the first ones to put anything out about it, but one of the things that we thought to cover was what happened afterwards? Like, what did the attackers do once they gained access? And so that was kind of what we focused on. And I think people were interested in that so that they could put it in some detection opportunities or whatever to try to get ahead of it in case they did get hit by it, because really nobody knew what it was exactly, but they knew that it was serious and they wanted to be able to get ahead of it some way.
And I'm sure you had plenty of time to write a blog with all the other things you had going on in there. That's one thing I wanted to ask you. How do you and John Hammond do those kind of things? Of
ChatGPT writes them.
Oh, well,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, you can't really rely on ChatGPT to do all of that. But yeah, we luckily, we have the SOC analysts who are doing the analysis. We have the report, so we could go back and do that. We did work over the weekend. I went back and I looked at all the reports. I did even some extra analysis just to make sure that this is correct, that we're, what we're finding here. And then, yeah, it took me on Sunday, actually, I wrote the blog and just made the graphics and all of that, but it was just putting all the pieces together. Sadly, we figured out that there were actually blips leading to this before everything really started to burn down. We saw pieces of this like even as early as May, but we just didn't know. We thought these were just kind of one-off SonicWall type things, but then suddenly, like especially right after Arctic Wolf released their report, like it really just started to go crazy. I think the attackers realized that this moment of opportunity might be close to them at any point, and so they just really like set it on fire at that point. And that's all we were doing for the next week or so until we could kind of get ahead of it and try to get customers to rotate their credentials and follow, all the things that SonicWall was putting out as like, best case scenario.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. And Corey, I know you've been out there since early May writing blogs and LinkedIn articles about this. So,
yeah,
I kind of want to just share before I kick it off and set the stage.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it's been business as usual. It's the unfortunate thing when it comes to this. And I'd say probably last 4 or 5 months, I've had my own internal campaign where I was tired of having to respond to a lot of these compromises and finding the entry point to be a misconfigured firewall, misconfigured VPN. And it always led to that. And so I started my own internal campaign where, it's tough doing, what Huntress does, what we do. You have to balance the amount of alerts that you send to make sure they're actionable, to make sure the partner will receive them and pay attention and do something with it. It's that fine line of alert fatigue. And so I look at it as actionable versus non-actionable events. And so since I was getting tired of it, while it wasn't technically covered in our service plan, we were going out there, just reaching out to our partner saying, we're seeing these failed brute force attempts on your VPN. We're seeing these return messages that are indicative that you have some misconfigurations, right? Hey, I'm seeing this come out of China. You have no employees in China, as far as I know. Why are you allowing China to VPN in, right? Why aren't you doing geofiltering? Or, hey, this has already been added to our botnet blocking. Why is that not turned on? And then it's just, again, initiating conversations, which is half of what we do, right? Is as long as we can get them on the phone and talk about the configuration part, we can go a very long way with it. So, and these definitely come in waves.
But how many customers do you have?
Again, I'm the managed security services side of SonicWall. So those are, prior solutions, granted, those that come to us for SOC monitoring or any of the MDR, whether it's cloud, network, endpoint, right? I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's probably total endpoints to include cloud, all three pillars. It's about 500,000, maybe. I'm just throwing a random number out.
You can't really talk to them. Like you're saying, you try to talk.
Oh, as far as partners, I don't have the number, but it's a lot, thousands of thousands, right? And so, I'm not. If I see everything properly configured, if it's indicative that someone's just banging on your door, because that's going to happen no matter what, right? Someone's going to bang on your door. If you have a firewall, someone's going to attempt to see, okay, is there any holes in here that I could potentially, it's vulnerable that I can get in through. And so when I see all the proper responses coming out, sometimes there's not a lot you can do about it. But when I, again, start seeing misconfigurations and return messages that aren't what I'm expecting, like, hey, this was blocked through botnet, or this was a geofiltering block before it could even attempt the username and password. Well, that's what I'm looking for.
Got it. All right. So let's do some quick intros, Gare. I'll turn it to you. So Spencer, you've been very quiet there, and thanks for joining us. It's been a while. You're going to share some perspective because from a breach side, you're working a number of these cases. So quick intro from you, Spencer, then I'll go around the horn.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate you all having me back. Love being here. As Andrew said, my name is Spencer Pollack. I'm a cybersecurity attorney with McDonald Hopkins. Obviously, we do a lot of front-end work, but we do a ton of the breach work. Group's done about 18,000 incidents, breaches. I've done about 1,100. So we're pretty well versed in this, fortunately, unfortunately. I'm glad to be here to help share some perspective about that side.
Thanks. Jamie, wonderful to have you as a first time here on the CyberCall. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Jamie Levy. I'm the Director of Adversary Tactics here at Huntress. So this is our threat intel arm of the company. So, we look a lot over these reports, put out threat reports over that, various threat blogs, et cetera. My background's mostly in incident response, forensics, also software development. I'm a core developer on the Volatility Project, which is an open source project that allows you to do forensic analysis of the RAM of any machine. I've been in the space for over 15 years, probably closer to 20 years now. But so, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Jamie.
Corey, since she was 10.
Yeah. Corey, good to have you back, bud.
Thank you. Corey Clark, Vice President of Threat Operations for SonicWall. SonicWall acquired our company, Solutions Granted, November 2023. I'm actually the overseer and the architect of our Security Operations Center globally. So we have a center here in the United States. We have a center in EMEA as well. I also oversee our MDR offering, so endpoint cloud as a service to MSPs and MSSPs.
Awesome. And Chris Lair, thanks for joining. I think everybody knows you out there. I'll let you do an intro once we get to you coming up here. Gary, let me let you kick things off here on some questions.
Yeah, Jamie, I'll start with you. So, we always have a review of the Verizon breach report. And so in the 2025 version, it said that exploitations of vulnerabilities past phishing. right? And that's the first time that's happened for initial access, at least. And so 34% rise in largely 0 days associated with VPN attacks.
Mhm.
So, like, as they start to pivot from SonicWall and now back over to Fortinet, just give us some idea of where we are and kind of where you think this is headed.
Oh, geez. Yeah. I mean, this really isn't new. I mean, the various APTs have gone after edge devices, routers, et cetera, for quite some time. And it makes sense because, I mean, if there's an easy access to it, that's a good foothold. Especially if they know that a particular device is at a company that they're wanting to target. Like once they gain that foothold, then it makes it easier for them to get internally. And so, yeah, I don't think that that's something that's ever going to go away. And I think like attacking routers, especially like this is something that's just going to continue on, especially now that people are working from home more often. This is like the lowest hanging fruit type thing. Like the attackers just realize this. Like they don't have to phish somebody; they can just gain access. Probably nobody's even going to know they're there. They can just do whatever they want, listen in, et cetera. So yeah, this is not an easy solution that's going to just go away.
Yeah, I mean, Corey, you mentioned, he looks for people that have some type of a misconfiguration. Like, what percentage of people do you think are configured everywhere on their edge properly?
Oh, that I think so, or the Corey?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Low, right?
I feel like it's probably pretty low. I don't know exactly where the onus should be. If it's, like if we need to make it easier for people to configure things, like maybe that's where we need to head to, is like, put the onus on the actual product makers to make it, almost impossible to misconfigure these things. But yeah, obviously if that was the underlying problem in this particular case where that we just had with SonicWall, where it was just configuration issues, that we know that a lot of people just didn't have this correct, right? And we know that it was a big problem. It's pretty rampant. And so, yeah.
So, Corey, you write blogs on SSL VPNs for some time. Can you talk us through why this is such an enduring weak point after years of patching and awareness? I mean, there's a handful of big companies, right? And they've all been patching for a long time. So why are we still here?
I mean, it's the same as Microsoft, right? It's SSL VPN is the most commonly used technology when it comes to a firewall. If you take a step back, you have to acknowledge, okay, this is entry into your front door. And so I look at the firewall, as I've always said, it's your front door to your house. They want to get in, and they want to get in with as much permission as possible. And so they're targeting the VPN technology because it gives you, once you authenticate, once you're in through that door, it gives you access to everything. If you think about it like your office, right? You're now saying, okay, you've come through the front door of my office. Now you have access to the server room. You have access to everything in here. And that's what that technology gives you the ability to do. And so it gives you the keys to the kingdom once you bypass it. So boom, we're going to target the SSL VPN because one, we know it's the most commonly used technology on firewalls. And two, we know the level of access it gives us is what we want and what we need. And we've seen it. We've seen adversaries take the code and then they've dissected. And the code's very, very similar across all makes, models, brands of firewalls. And
so I guess my question is, if that's the case, and we've been patching them, like, why are there new vulnerabilities? It seems like all the time. Do you know what I mean? Is it just that you're carrying old hardware and old software and just carrying legacy stuff that everyone has been evolving?
It's part of it, yes, right. So it's taking and it's finding new bugs in the existing code, and a lot of it ends up being whack-a-mole. I mean, this again, I have to compare it to the most common thing, Microsoft. We're constantly playing whack-a-mole, plugging those holes, and eventually we have to look at better technologies and what are we shifting to, and that's exactly, like I said, that's exactly what we're seeing. And to address the point earlier of, making it easier to configure, that's tough. A lot of them, I've had these conversations with partners. A lot of them are checkboxes, right? Oh, I didn't know that. We run against, and we see this in our industry, right? A lot of people like, I don't need your help. I got this. I've been in this IT field for 20 years. I don't need anybody to tell me how to configure a firewall. It becomes very difficult conversations. And this is why you see shifts, right? You see shifts in, so I'll speak for ourselves. You see shifts in us and what we're doing. SonicWall acquired a ZTNA company right after ours because long-term SSL VPNs going away. I've said it multiple webinars over the last month, right? That I'll bet my paycheck in 3 years SSL VPN is gone. If it's not, I hope no one comes to collect. But this is what's happening. And then
nothing happens in 3 years. I've not seen anything happen that scale in this industry in 3 years.
I have high hopes.
And
Maybe
then 30 years. I mean, AOL just announced in September they're finally getting in the way of dial-up after 34 years.
I didn't even know they were still around, honestly. But yeah, that's crazy.
But what's interesting, Gary, we did see, Corey, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fortinet has already sunset on a number of theirs.
Oh, I think he locked up.
Yeah.
While he comes back.
A great picture of him, too.
Yeah. While he comes back, and this is also a shift I'm seeing in the industry of offering specific configuration, like fully managed
literally gotten rid of it.
So that's something I know that we launched, and I see other competing organizations launching the same thing. Hey, let us fully manage it for you, because obviously we know the least thing you have in your life right now is time, right? And it's very tough in this industry to have those experts with that type of experience. So a lot of vendors like ourselves are saying, hey, we have solutions where we can fully manage your firewall for you. We can send you those audit reports, those compliance reports. So that way you don't have to worry about it. It's done.
Yeah.
Except a lot of time, like you said, they've been doing it a while and they know better, except that it's an issue. The same way I try to coach people are in the business and they know better, except their profits stink. It's like,
yeah.
Corey, 2FA was brought up in chat. Like a lot of times we do see lack of 2FA on these, SSL VPNs.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that. Is it still, we talked, Jordan's like, oh, it was getting, but what we talked about earlier about getting bypassed was specifically through an OAuth attempt. And that
correct. And so you can see that. You see some vulnerabilities that can do remote code executions, can completely bypass your MFA. I'll tell you from my firsthand experience, I've found a lot of organizations feel they had, and including claims that we saw on Reddit and investigated, they claim they have 2FA enabled on everything. But in my direct experience, when I dive through it with the partner and we're trying to create that timeline, we find accounts that just aren't. It sticks with me like, all of our accounts have MFA enabled. And I'm like, okay, well, what about this? Can you validate this specific account that was used during the compromise? And if I receive a response like, oh, that guy's been gone for 3 years, it's the only account that didn't have it enabled. Or we start looking at the majority of what I'm seeing, especially in the last week, are LDAP attacks. And so what they're doing is they're compromising the service or bind account that authenticates for LDAP. Now, that account, it's written everywhere. And it's not just for firewalls. This is general system admin knowledge. When you create a service account, it should have the least amount of privileges necessary. So when it's authenticating, it should not be a domain admin. But I've seen too many people using their built-in default domain administrator, and that's because it's easy, right? And so that account has the ability to log in locally. It has the ability to do an interactive login. And so once they get those credentials, now they're in. Now they have full keys to the kingdom to do what they want. And so that was my last post that you were talking about around LDAP that I posted, and I kind of went on a soapbox rant there of we need to get back to the basics of securing these accounts. Because yes, any firewall that has this authentication account, the service account, will maintain that account in the logs. So if your firewall gets compromised, they'll be able to extract that information. So you need to reduce your attack surface. And if they compromise that account, it should not be able to do anything.
So, Andrew, people are staying in chat on this 2FA. So I think people are saying is, was this like what Corey said, which is they had an old account that didn't have it, or was it a bypass somehow? And I think people kind of want to drill down on that.
Yeah, maybe Jamie, did you see? Maybe can you just share what you saw in all? You dealt with quite a few of these. What have you seen? Can you kind of demystify what they're asking?
Yeah, I think looking back at some of the the incidents that we had, a lot of them did have LDAP issues, like what Corey's talking about here. We did have one where the customer was adamant that they had 2FA. So the problem, like, we're in a situation where we're just this third party, right? And so we don't have access to the device to verify what status it's actually in. Like, we have logs and we can kind of talk back and forth with the customer, but at some point they're going to disengage because they had a ransomware event, and so that's taking more precedent. They're not going to come back to us and be like, yeah, we did have 2FA, we verified, here's a picture or whatever. Like, we don't get that closure, and so we have to just go by what they said
That's the
happened.
tough part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Spence? Just real quick, Spence, and 20 plus cases. What are you seeing? You get the actual forensic data. You're the quarterback of the case. Do you hear some of the, oh, absolutely, it was enabled, and then
it's like a lot of times I'm hearing from internal IP that is enabled, but then I'm hearing from external.
I think
his microphones. I think he has two mics because it started off.
Then
it got better. And then it sounds like
he's got the shady attorney mic, and then he's got.
Wait, is this any better? That's better?
Yes.
Okay, I'm moving closer. Way better. Sorry about that. It feels like the start, I'm hearing from a lot of internal IT people that they had everything buttoned up and everything was fine. But in the past kind of like week, we're finding out that wasn't the case, obviously. The forensics still kind of early, and those are also, internal or external, right? I feel bad for the MSPs telling me that everything was buttoned up. And what I always warn people when we get on is, like, don't speculate and don't make a statement that you're going to have to backtrack on, because the problem is, when I've been getting on, at least initially, and a lot of people were calling it a 0 day. It was a little bit of an easier conversation, I think, because if it was a 0 day, and not for you, Corey, and I'm not saying it was a 0 day, but the conversation at that time was, okay, if it's a 0 day, it's almost impossible to prevent. But as we found out more, it was a lot of preventable things. So MSPs are being put in an interesting position, especially the ones that came out real full-fledged on this. And so there's been a lot of backsliding, I think, in conversations. But we do keep seeing more and more of, I think it was a big uptick, Andrew, when we talked 2 weeks ago. Like, my group had 20. I think we've added another 10. We just got one this morning, actually. They're all Akira, or they're all mainly Akira and Koala Locker. I called a couple of the other breach coaches. They're seeing very much the similar thing, and they're seeing a kind of a similar pattern. And I need to circle back with 2 or 3 others to find out kind of what's been going on their forensic side. But, I can give you kind of some perspective of what we're seeing with Akira when they're getting in. It seems like it's a lot less sophisticated affiliates from Akira versus the more sophisticated, which tells me that they're moving as quickly as they can at this point. A lot of times when they're getting in, they're not stealing a ton of data, and their demands have been a lot lower than we're usually seeing. And they're not stealing the normal amount of hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes, where I think you see a longer dwell time. I think there's a lot of more of a smash and grabs, right? Where they figured out something that they could poke around with. I have no idea how they figured it out, though. That's a lot of times that we're having trouble answering that question of how did they figure this out now? Because I know it was from about a year ago. And I was talking to Chris.
What's similar and what's dissimilar about the cases?
Everybody's blaming the MSP. That would be the biggest similarity I can give you right now in terms of the legal perspective, right?
Okay,
on the technical side,
probably want to write that down.
Yeah, I'm having every conversation. Well, the first one was like, if it was 0 day, then nobody was blaming an MSP. But it's getting very delicate at this point, where some things were not enabled, and representations were made. I'd say that's split, right? Because I think a lot of the times, I think the MSPs were warning clients about this and putting it in writing, and those clients just weren't acting on it. And then the other 50%, it just sounds like it fell through the cracks. So I don't know what's going to go after this. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of subrogation actions that could come from this. But I think
for a lot of MSPs, a lot of it, they're maybe responsible for the actioning for their customers, right?
Exactly. And it depends on what their statement of work says and their contract has. So if that
Gary, I was just going to ask Gary, maybe just talk about this with Spencer on, again, this is something you just absolutely bludgeon MSPs about, is process, change control. How important is this right now where, if you're saying, hey, my MSA, we do firewall support and we do X, Y, and Z, or rather in your scope of work, rather not your MSA, your scope of work, how important is this?
There's a lot of areas where there's so much attack surface. I think even legally, it's hard to address, all of it. But this is one area where you can, right? Like it's the front door. So I think 100% of the time you have to be very clear on where that responsibility in writing and in your MSA, lies on this. And I continue to talk to MSPs who haven't updated their MSA in 5 years. Think about that, where we are compared to 5 years ago. So there's 100% chance that this and other things are not addressed. And Spencer, I'm sure you see it all the time after the fact, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of them don't have MSAs and they have no indemnification. They have no limits of liability, which is shocking to me. And I'm sure Eric Tild, if he was on this, would be just cringing about that as well. And I think that opens people up to huge amounts of liability. And I'm also curious if their insurance are disclaiming them for not having those kind of contractual provisions in place and then opening up the insurance company for full limits of liability. And these situations are just such a stark reminder. And what I tell MSPs is, Gary, what you just said, like you need a really clear scope and really clear terms in your MSA and make sure things are very much buttoned up. Because if not, I think people just don't want to have the conversations because a lot of MSPs, like doctors, like lawyers, it's like long-term relationships. You don't feel like you need it. But the problem is if one of your clients gets hit, it's probably not them going to subrogate against you. It's going to be the insurance company, and the insurance company doesn't care about your relationship.
Yeah. And Andrew, you mentioned about process. It starts with your MSA, and then your process has to get built about that promise, right? So that's literally like, here are the things that we need to make sure that we have process in place for checks and balances, automation where we can, right? In order to be able to try at least to be defensible. I don't think you can be, it's very complex, right? When you have 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 customers, trying to keep everything the way it should be, even doing it right, is very hard. But if you have governance, then you have at least a defensible, point, and it ties back to what you promised, what your MSA says. Like, I feel like that's the best we can do. And most MSPs, as Spencer said, they don't even have step one.
Yeah.
I always say, Andrew, you survive every mistake in business, right? You learn from every mistake in business that you survive.
Yeah. One thing that you hear a lot of, Gary, and maybe this is, it depends on your MSP maturity, but when it comes to vulnerability management these days, if someone doesn't have scanning and process and, reviews of VPNs on edge, et cetera, is, I've got to go sell it, first. Like when you see that this is one of the primary, like I said, the fact that this bypassed phishing as the number 2 behind credentials, like what do you say to MSPs that give you that's the reason they're not getting
what I
tools
say, which is you got to decide, like, who knows more, you or the customer, you or the prospect. And in every case, all the security first MSPs and MSSPs that we work with, this is the reason why they grow. This is the reason why they have a higher seat price, higher profits, bigger enterprise value.
is because they take that stance with every prospect and every customer that they're the authority. And the only reason that the customer wouldn't pay them a little bit more to let them do it is because they don't understand the risks in the same way. And that's our fault, not the customers. It's literally our job by definition is to share those risks. Now you got me all fired up, Andrew.
All right, I'll let you go. I'll let you continue or hand to Chris.
I had one more question. I want to get to Chris, but I think this is, for Jamie, important because it came up with Spencer several times. Like, so there were some call outs, whether or not whether it was prudent to call this a 0 day, right? So Huntress, Arctic Wolf, got called out by some people on this. So what made you think it was a 0 day initially? And let's talk about just this. This is a big deal because it's one thing if it's a 0 day. It's another thing, if it's not, in terms of how Spencer mentioned how the customers look at the MSP.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. So we definitely don't take these things lightly when we're saying that things look like a 0 day. And that was really what we said. Like, it really it smelt like one. And also because a lot of the customers were fully patched. They were, they had updated whatever. And so we thought this is probably what was happening just because of the sheer volume of incidents that we had within a week. And even prior to that and even afterwards, I mean, and then we'd also spoken with SonicWall, and at the time they hadn't figured out what the problem was. Now they thought that it was the vulnerability that they came out with, later on. They thought, but they said it didn't look the same. They said it didn't have the same ROC chain and all this other stuff. So and that's because it wasn't necessarily that, right? It was because credentials hadn't been rotated and whatever after people had migrated away from it. So it was just like this weird thing where nobody really knew what the problem was, but we knew that people were getting just wrecked by it, and they had already updated to the latest version. And so that looked like a 0 day to everybody. I mean, just how much we saw of it, Arctic Wolf, various other researchers. Like, I know people at other companies who are working these cases, and it was a nightmare. And so it just seemed like something was terribly wrong. Like, it was a 0 day and nobody knew what it was.
So I feel like it's tough, right? Because it carries a lot. Sometimes I feel like also people like Huntress, they're racing to get out there to get 30,000 clicks or whatever. And it's a tough thing. It's not the first time like this is kind of pumped up. And I don't really know what the answer is.
Yeah. I mean, we weren't trying to get any credit. We were just like,
both MSPs and vendors get kind of caught in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give my 2 cents if that's all right. So I call it unsubstantiated claims, right? And Huntress did say this looks like, or this might be. They never said, from what I saw, from what I read, this is a 0. I never saw.
Yeah, we never said it
this
was
is a 0 day, right? But this is a problem when it comes to objective facts or subjective facts, and how customer bases, MSPs, end users, how they read it. And I have to constantly recorrect my SOC on this, right? Of the separation between objective and subjective, because if we send out an alert for any type of endpoint event and say, hey, there's also a SSL VPN vulnerability included in that alert, but we don't see any of their firewall logs. Now you just told the customer this is due to your firewall, even though you said, hey, there's this other vulnerability out there. I want to make sure you're aware. They immediately jump to, well, SonicWall SOC said this happened because of their firewall, even though we don't have any of their logs. And so this is the tough part of being able to relay the information effectively so people don't just read what they want, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And we did investigate every claim, kind of circling back here. We did investigate every claim. There were claims that said, hey, we have a perfect configuration. I think including the one you might be talking about. And we got, our internal threat team got on with that, and we found issues. We found issues with the configuration. I believe if I look at, we had over 200 reported cases directly to us. Of those, there were 2 that needed a deeper dive into. That's a lot, it's a lot of reports, and come to find out, it's a very tough conversation when you get on the phone with somebody and they think, and it's usually MSPs, right? As you said, Spencer, and you get on like, we're locked down, we're good, everything's good to go. No, I mean, we looked at when this event first started is when I started getting brought into some of these internal meetings, and we look at the most common firmware version that's out there. You know, we have I'll just, without saying the specific numbers, we have a 7.0, 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3. And when this first started, the majority of partners were on 7.0. And now, as of today, most are on 7.3, the most latest and up-to-date firmware. And I mean, this kind of goes into what you were talking about earlier with vulnerabilities and patching. That's a thing that I feel like most organizations are doing the least amount of, is those basics. The most cost-effective thing you can do in security of patching. And from the MSP side, I'm seeing the exact same responses over and over. My customer won't let me. They can't afford any downtime. I even, during one of these events in the last week, someone said, I can't have you isolated in my machines. I can't have any downtime. Okay. And we got this during the reconnaissance phase before an actual encryption happened, right? We saw them running their typical script of what they're running before they do a full infection. And we're being told, you can't, no, I'll handle it from here. No isolation. I got this.
Yeah,
Can't have downtime.
We've had that on our side too, where people don't want to be isolated, even though it's like clearly there's a ransomware event. One of your machines got ransomed. It's going to spread. No, we don't want, we'll take care of it. And then the whole thing goes dark.
Then it gets to Spencer. And the MSP says, we did everything right. And then it come to find out, well, isolation never happened. This was detected during the reconnaissance phase, during the initial early phases of this compromise. But the customer told the MSP, or the MSP assumed, well, we can't take anything down right now. So, and the response just doesn't.
This is really good. I want to make sure we get over to Chris because he's got some great questions. But this is really good for MSPs to be listening to what Corey just, like this last 10 minutes of thinking about what you want that relationship with a customer to be based on your responsibility with that customer, because it doesn't seem fair, right? Doesn't seem fair. The customer wants us responsible, but doesn't want us to do the things we need to do.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Yeah. I think most people know me, but Chris Lair, Solid Security, Austin Incident Response, Cybersecurity. I got some questions, but I'm going to throw some comments in here of the stuff I like to hear. Now, what's interesting about this 0-day thing is, yeah, it wasn't a 0-day, but what do we do as a community to say, hey, you need to do something right now that you guys didn't do enough, and to get people to respond? And we kind of have these, like, today it's kind of black and white, right? It's either it's a 0-day, all hands on deck, or it's not at all. And I think that as a community, we need to kind of figure those things out, because we do need, in this case, we did need the MSPs to jump and do something and investigate and take action. We didn't want them to assume that, hey, you patched, you're good, because that could not be the case. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that, I was at Evolve last week, and there was a lot of conversations about this, and people were coming up to me, what do I do? A lot of people had the conversation about SSLVPN. And I think it's one of the things that I like to reiterate to people is like, look, if you had a conversation about whether or not SSLVPN is the right choice in 2025 for your client, or did you have it back in 2023 or 2022, and you haven't had that conversation again, then shame on you. Because that alone, I think there was a lot of MSPs that you could kind of tell in the conversations that we had that they had probably not addressed that particular issue strong enough, right? And we see it. We see it on the instance that we work. We see a lot of people using SSL without MFA, or with one user as not having MFA and everybody else does. So I always tell people, hey, yeah, it's good to articulate risk to your client, but if they say I accept the risk, or no, I don't want to do that, don't just tuck that away and never approach it with them again. It's just not right. When I worked at the bank, our chairman and CEO, that's the number one thing he told me. He's like, look, I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to accept this risk, but you better not forget about it. You better come back in 6 months and whatever, and give it to me again so I can make a decision then. So I've taken that forward in everything I do. So those are kind of my comments on everything. It's very interesting to watch this particular situation unfold. I know from a damage control perspective on the SonicWall side, I just know that a lot of MSPs just said, heck, I'm done with SonicWall. And is that fair? Probably not. But I can say working with the SonicWall teams and the engineers behind the scenes over the last, 12 months, they're incredibly responsive and incredibly transparent of what they say, what they tell us, what's going on and whatnot, and all those types of things. I mean, they've told us, hey, look, if you think a firewall is got an issue from a security perspective, we will ship you, and you ship this company, a client, not a client necessarily an incident response client. We'll ship them a brand new firewall. You ship that other one back so we can investigate, and we'll tell you everything we find. So, that's the difficult thing in having conversations with this, to think that.
Yeah, because another vendor is going to be so much better.
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
They're not.
Yeah.
That's my point. That's my point. In this case, when there could be a lot of unnamed vendors that would have said, hey, this is not a 0-day, I'd be, but SonicWall, it just didn't feel right for somebody to say, hey, they're brushing something under the rug or something like that. Just didn't equate to me. So anyway, with that, a little Chris Lair segue there, but I'm going to come to Jamie, and we know that dwell time is. I'm going to combine a couple of things over here. We know dwell time is very important when it comes to these things, but we also know in this latest Akira ransomware binary that they are destroying some artifacts, specifically logs. So from your perspective, what can the MSPs do or other people do to kind of combat this, or what can happen from an incident response situation to continue to do investigations if logs have been deleted?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Mostly you would hope that there's something that you have in place to kind of circumvent this from happening. I mean, that logs can get deleted very easily, but if you have a SIM or something where you can put the logs ahead of time, then at least you would have them to look back. And so I think that is probably where MSPs are going to have to start looking forward, is like, how can we save the logs somewhere ahead of time just in case we need them? And maybe you don't save them forever, but you save them like a week's worth of logs or something like this. Because typically that's about what the dwell time is. I mean, even though I think Spencer said, they're just kind of smashing and grabbing, and they were kind of here towards the end, a lot of times they gain access ahead of time, and they're just looking around and seeing what they can take, or maybe taking things, and then they'll come back sometime later and trash the place. So just having the logs ahead of time, like save somewhere, definitely will save you a lot of heartache. Otherwise, then you have to get really old school forensics and do like a full disk analysis type thing and try to recover them. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I would agree with, they are moving faster.
Mm-hmm.
So we used to see them sitting in there much longer before they started doing their exfil and then doing their encryption.
Yeah, it used to be I call it low and slow.
Yeah,
low and slow attacks over the last 3 years were common. Now they're in and out like they were before the low and slow approach. And to echo what Jamie said as well, I mean, the key thing for me around this, and again, exactly, we're seeing, they're deleting the breadcrumbs, deleting logs. So what technologies does your organization have to monitor that? Mm-hmm. And then when it's happening, it's a timer, right? As soon as you see that happening, if you can't prevent it from happening, as soon as you see it happening, what is the response? And that is the importance of having an organization like us, like Huntress, like Arctic Wolf, like Rocket Cyber, et cetera, of someone monitoring your environment and your solutions, because I just hear it all too often of, we're our own SOC. We do it ourselves. I have engineers that do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the biggest other problems that a lot of customers had was that they didn't even have full coverage. So like even if they had EDR in place, for some reason, there's this thought of like, I'll just put EDR on the servers. That's it. I'm just going to cover my servers. And then the attackers get in through one of the users' machines, and then they do lateral movement, and then they're completely off the grid. We have no visibility into that. And then the question comes back of like, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you see anything? Because we can't protect the things we can't see, is really what it is.
Jamie, I got to tell you, when over the last couple of years, as Kaseya launched first and 365 endpoint, then user, one of the things that I did was, pre-launch, kind of make some calls to trusted, customers and talk through with them. And the one thing in both cases that I was most surprised about, first with MDR in endpoint, and then in like cloud detect and response with user, almost none of the MSPs I spoke to had to send. I said to them, "You're using SentinelOne. How come you have 1,000 RMM licenses but only 400 SentinelOne?" And it's either what Corey said, they're just putting them on devices they think, or a percentage of customers, because the other ones they said don't see the value in it. I was taken aback, by it.
Yeah.
Corey, quick question, Chris, if I could, to Corey, because Corey rants on this all the time. CK West says, should we be monitoring the log? So, Corey, can you take that not only as a yes, no, or question, but then, you're famous. Are you going to let me see your logs?
So should we monitor the logs? And it's tough. I know Jamie brought up a SIM, but I don't see a lot of organizations feeding raw Windows logs into a SIM itself. And this is where EDR becomes so important in an environment, right? We're all used to antivirus, and by now we should all be used to the importance of EDR, and then add the M onto it and someone monitoring it, management of this solution, of this. Unfortunately, as we know, no matter what organization you are, it costs more money. The more that you do in your onion, right, your layers of security, it costs more and more money. So this is where you need to have, and not every organization has the same security budget. MSPs, and you mentioned maturity, right? Of course, an MSP just starting will take any business they can, right? You're doing X, Y, and Z. Yes, I'll take you on. I'll help you with that. Oh, you're only doing Z. Yeah, I'll take you on. But as MSPs mature, they start driving the show here. They say, for you to do business with me, here is my solution. Here is my package. And you have to get what I always call the best bang for the buck. Now, of course, I want more and more, right? I wear a tinfoil hat to be great. If we can start talking zero trust on the network and the endpoint side, if we can start talking about a vulnerability management offering, if we can talk about, MDR across, there's so many different layers and stacks and what you can do in your security, but you have to really start diving into the basics and look at the basics. Look at the numbers. Look where the majority of attacks are happening. I always used to lead with endpoint. And we know that's critical, right? That's it. But I'm seeing the majority of attacks in the cloud. And there's so many organizations that aren't doing any cloud monitoring. And that's a lot of times the pivot point on getting credentials, right? I mean, we talked about it when we started this, about, a phishing attack. I think it was the SolarWinds one. Workday. That's what.
Yeah.
Workday.
And so sorry, I'll go off on a rant. I'm sorry. Circling back, yes, it's important to monitor logs, but it's important to also be monitoring the right logs that get the best bang for your buck. Yeah. I have people coming to me saying, hey, well, what do you think? Do I need to put a sensor in so you can monitor all my switches? And I'm like, well, that'll be important, but what about this stuff that kind of takes priority over that? Are you currently doing that first? Because that's going to be the majority of things. And like, no. Like, well, how about you save some money and someone monitoring your switches, and let's look at your cloud. Let's get cloud ingestion happening. Let's look where most of the compromisers are coming from.
Carl Katz had a question about Huntress SIM monitoring. And so the reason why I brought it up is we do have a product that it only ingests certain logs, and one of the most important ones that we ingest is the security log, which allows you to see who logs on. And so we do have a lot of machine names that we track that are related to these various threats. And yes, in this particular case, it would have helped a lot if some people had SIM, because you would have seen it ahead of time that they were getting logins from these particular malicious known actors. So definitely that is one thing I'd recommend.
Chris, with time, can we ask Huntress?
That's what I asked. Hey, Spencer. So you've been sitting on a bunch of these cases, and your team has been sitting on the cases. From a legal perspective, what do you see and I know this is a kind of a loaded question, but what do you see from a legal perspective when a threat actor gets through it doesn't matter what the hardware platform is, when they get through like an SSLVPN and an attacker gets into the internal network, what are you seeing the biggest kind of pitfalls for the clients are? Are they mainly like legal, contractual, or are they more, class action, regulatory wise?
Everything, but let's just start with regulatory. So what we're seeing a lot of now is the regulators are getting more sophisticated, at least on the surface level, about, okay, so what was the vulnerability? And if we have to tell them the vulnerability, they're like, okay, so was there a patch available? And let's just say this was from a year ago and somebody didn't patch it. The question is, well, why didn't you patch it? And if we don't have a reasonable story to be telling, we're getting more and more enforcement actions and investigations on this. That's why, like, I'm highly encouraging my MSP clients to go out to everybody and, one, get the statement of work in the MSA really tight, but also set expectations. So if you're, as an MSP, not doing this for them, you need to make sure that they understand that it's on them to do it. And if you're doing it for them, to do it, because regulators are all over us for this. Class action lawsuits, definitely. Plaintiffs are bringing up these vulnerabilities more and more in the settlement discussions where people aren't taking the reasonable and necessary steps. So I think that is impacting settlement value. I think consumers and individuals as well. I think the biggest issue, though, and Corey, you're right, when you were talking about this, the oversaturation of alerts, because I hear from some MSPs being like, well, we get like 50 of these. Like, what am I, how many of these am I really supposed to be paying attention to? And my response is, well, you got to pay attention to them. So, and because what I tell clients is like, I can't
That sounds expensive.
Yeah. It is. But what I tell clients, I'm like, it's business versus legal, and they never get along. Business and legal always butt heads. And from the legal perspective, a regulator is just not going to accept that. They're not going to be like, they're going to be like, this was pushed out, right? Corey and his team pushed this out a year ago. Why didn't you do something about it? Or as an MSP, why did you tell them that they were enabled and patched? Like, God forbid they do that. And they're digging into the safeguards, right? The safeguards are so important here. Because say 10 years ago, I don't know, regulators and plaintiff attorneys were a lot less sophisticated on this. And they were more looking on the high level. They're getting much more into the weeds now, which, Chris and I have dealt with some more intensive investigations where they'll just drill into both of us about these things.
Spencer, clarify safeguards as in CIS safeguards or safeguards? Can you clarify what you mean?
Right.
Just technical in general. Yeah, technical in general. Depending on what industry they're in. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing
whatever framework.
Yeah. So if you're in financial services, they're going to start pointing their fingers at that. If you're just kind of in none, they're going to be looking for some type of general safeguards. And then the other part I was going to add on to what my, Spencer's answer is, hey, these regulators, they're not going to jump on week one. You might not hear from them for 6 months. You might not hear from them for 12 months. So you think the dust is all settled and you're, back on your horse riding in the prairie. And next thing you know, whoosh, that attorney general or that regulator's come in to slap you upside the head, going to ask you more questions and more requests. So it's a serious deal.
Andrew, I know we're getting up against it, but I wanted to say, look, what I always tell people is this is the reason why every MSP has to determine what their minimum standard is for the tool set, for governance, for standardization, everything around IG1. Like, what is your approach? And that has to be like the minimum. And then what does it cost you to do that and make 65 or 70% gross margin so you can afford to do it? And make sure that every role, every process is built into it. And that's what you sell. Because if you don't do that, you're going to have, if you have risk with 20% of your base, you might as well have it with 100%. Do you know what I mean? And what I found is every MSP that does this, not every customer will come that way. They end up with more revenue with fewer customers when they go through the process, and a way better company that they can build on, and a safer one, and customers who want to be protected.
Yeah, and it's better retention too. Those customers will be better customers.
Chris, Spencer, I know we might go a minute over. If you guys have to jet, I get it. But I'd just like to ask you both collectively a question. In 2020, 2021, we had this really reverberation from the insurance companies, the cyber insurance companies in particular, around RMM. Mm-hmm. If you recall, right? There were some that wouldn't write for a while about RMM. So this is just speculation. I just like both of your comments. Could we see something similar with SSL VPN, where, if you're running said SSL VPN, if you haven't gone to some type of, ZTNA, we're either going to have a higher premium or we won't write you at this level. Could we see a backlash with all these cases with the Avanti, Fortinet, SonicWall just ad nauseum in the last 12 to 24 months? What are your thoughts, Chris, from the insurance, or either one?
I was
going
to say the biggest difference right now between then and now, that was a more hard market where it was the competition was a lot stiffer, right? So 2019, we had like the 5-question applications. Then they got hit with a ton of ransomware 2020. So then it shifted where there's a ton of industry losses. So then they shifted into more of a hard market. Right now, it's such a soft market that no, it's disappointing. I won't get on a soapbox about this, but I truly believe the insurance industry can be a driver of change, and they can have these better requirements in place. But as long as the soft market it's easier to get insurance.
Easier
right
to
now.
Easier to get insurance, and the carriers overall are competing, and they want to have the least amount of friction to try to sell a policy is the best way of putting it. So if they're all going to do it. If one of them doesn't do it, then they're not going to do it because they're going to feel that person is going to have the edge by not asking that question or not having that restriction. So, yeah.
Is that because they figured out how much they have to charge to make money? And so that's all they care about?
Yeah. I mean, their business is writing policies and paying claims. But they just need to make more money than they're paying out. And then there's a certain amount, and that's what they work on. So in the case where we had years ago with all those RMMs, the losses were massive. Massive times, times 10, times 20, times 100 or whatever. And so that caught everybody by surprise. I think they've learned their lessons and they've just figured out the risk side of it a lot better. Yeah.
Got it.
Really good.
All right.
You got to get
I can't believe how
got to get Spence and Chris back for more.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can do that as early as, next week. Spence, sorry, we need to get more questions your way. I thought this was, I thought it was fantastic. Jamie, Corey, you are awesome. Really, really, really good conversation. I thought very educational for everybody out there. To our audience, thank you as always for tuning in. Chris, thanks for coming in, being a co-host, and Gary, welcome back. Good to see you. Hope we can get a few more weeks out of you here and there. And wishing everybody a safe week ahead. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
See you soon.